Prima. Jo, to je dobrý.
I'm here for building a new team together with two other people in the... Okay, hello, welcome everyone. I'm very glad to see so many of you, some familiar faces and also some new faces. Welcome to the Transformative Tech Meetup, the first one after at least 1 year. And we haven't been sitting idle. We have actually, instead of hosting live meetups, we have been making partnerships. And that's why Lubos Mali is with me on the stage today as the co-moderator. I'm Thomas de Bruyne. So welcome to the TransTech event. And Lubos is with me from Redbutton Edu, one of our 4 official partners for these events. We are in the Deloitte studios, the second partner. And then Sarah Polak is sitting there in the back, one of our future speakers here. And she is the representative of Pioneers. So today is really the coming together of 4 very purposeful driven communities in Czech Republic that want to make a positive impact in the world and in Czech Republic. So why we chose the topic of today, embodiment for a kinder society, is because I don't need to tell any one of you that right now in the world we're facing disruption, transformation, for good or for worse. And what really will unite us and help us coming through this is what we thought is being kind to each other. And it seems like the simplest thing to do. In real life, sometimes it doesn't seem as simple. And being a technology community, we thought, what if technology can help us? What if technology can connect us instead of separate us, make us distracted, overload us? And that is why we invited a number of startups, a number of investors, a number of business to see how can we put this into action. We will take some inspiration today from our speakers, which we will introduce in a moment, to see what is the rest of the world doing. And then after the speakers, then you will have some time to actually experience some demo experience. So thank you all for coming here today. Also thank you to the Redbutton Edu viewers. We have a few cameras in the room, so we are streaming at the same time to Redbutton. And Lubos will introduce us a little bit to the questions that we want to ask before we dive into the speakers.
Yeah. And even before those questions, we made a beautiful typo around this Deloitte building. I don't know if you realized, but there, when you mentioned that actually technology can bring us to kinder society and to simply better well-being, there is a little typo that says embodiment or kinder society.
Ooh.
Yeah? Which changes slightly the whole purpose of the meetup. Yeah. So if whoever you find, and they would say, "Oh, guys, you're going to kill us here. The society is going to collapse." No, this is just a typo. Tell them this. Look how a little letter can shift the whole session. Yeah. Anyways, we wanted to try a bit of interaction to know who's in this audience. Looking at you guys, you're probably not a very, how to say, a representative towards the rest of the population knowing technologies. But we will try something here. You will need your cell phones, so please take them out. And if we can have the presentation on the screen. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Good.
So there is a simple question. If you assess your maturity when it comes to using VR for building empathy, where would you be? There are 4 pictures. The first one should indicate this is nowhere near your interest. The second one is, I tried a bit, but actually do not think that's the best way forward. And then there are options that might indicate that you're actually good at it or brilliant at it. Yeah, and we'll see. 1 Joey, maybe a few more. Just hiding it for, not to influence each other. It's anonymous. We do not collect data from this. Yeah. Good. Oh, I thought that there will be only Joeys in this room. Mm. If not, then it's even better, so you can learn something new. Fantastic. The second one basically summarizes some of the keywords that our speakers will be talking about, and that's this. So to what extent are you familiar with following keywords? The embodiment, that was in the headline. I don't think it means a lot to like 99.999% of the people. Yeah. Building capabilities using VR. Anybody in the room doing it? Or even on online? Immersive stories, so can you imagine kind of introducing stories using some advanced technologies, not only words and non-verbal communication? Yeah. Cloud civilizations, that's the last piece of today's agenda. So let's check. We've got one person That's my bread and butter. I can't guess who that is, and then the whole kind of distribution. Anyways, brilliant. Hopefully, by the end of the session, you will learn something new about these 4 things, and our, the curves will move a little bit towards the right side. And I mean, that's the good bridge to the first speaker, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. So as a first speaker, I'm very pleased to welcome again Domna Banaku. Some of you might remember her. She was a speaker on our first TransTech event in Czech Republic. Domna is a postdoc researcher at Event Lab in Barcelona. She works together with Mel Slater, who many consider to be the grandfather of virtual reality. And Domna has been doing a lot of research into the very topic of embodiment, neuroscience, psychology, and virtual reality. So I'm very happy to welcome you back, Domna. The floor is all yours.
Hi, Thomas. Hi, everyone there. Thank you very much for the introduction. I wish I were there physically, but that will do. Hopefully next time we can be together in a physical space. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if there are any issues, please somebody interrupt me and let me know. So now hopefully you will be seeing my presentation. And I would like to kick off today's meeting with a new idea, which I'm going to introduce. We recently put it forward. We named it the Golden Rule Embodiment Principle. And the idea is to use it as a tool to bring about positive change and enhance prosocial behavior. So we do know we're familiar with the concept of virtual reality as empathy machine. It has gained a lot of hype over the past decade, maybe more now. The idea being that if we put ourselves in the bodies or in situations of discriminated against people or disadvantaged ones, then this will result in an increase in empathy. And there are numerous examples, some of which we'll probably see later on as well from the other speakers, addressing empathy with the help of virtual reality, from immersive journalism, from artistic installations and research. And Bevan and colleagues in their work, recent work, identify about 150 of such examples just between the period of 2012-2018, with many more that came up since then. At the Event Lab, we have also conducted similar studies, which I introduced last time, if you attended the talk. One of them was the use of virtual reality for domestic violence victims, led by my colleague Seinfeld, where they put participants, offenders, in the female body who will present their victim, and then they study how the experience can change emotional recognition, such as increasing understanding of happiness, of the emotion of happiness or fear in female faces, something that these populations have a deficit on. And it was found that this improves after the experience. And in a later study published last year, they also found relevant brain activity during the processing of ambiguous emotional stimuli after going through the experience. And in this other setup, we looked at how mothers embodying a child's body and then interacting themselves with another virtual mother can improve some aspects regarding empathic aspects related to their children's upbringing, but also their later behavior when interacting with their children in real life. But at the same time, while virtual reality has been shown in many such cases to improve explicit attitudes and some behaviors towards an outgroup, whatever that outgroup might be, we have also shown recently that it might not necessarily improve implicit attitudes when it comes to bias, and when we're mixing embodiment techniques with negative affective situations, when the content of the virtual reality experience is a negative one. In this in this aspect, for instance, what I want to focus on is the use of virtual reality to address implicit racial bias, something that has been studied for a long while and has been consistently shown that when white people are put in a black virtual body inside virtual reality, then this can lead to a decrease in their implicit racial bias during the experience, and also afterwards, a few days later on, which seems to be constant. And the results have also been replicated in a neural network model that was introduced by Bede. But in a later study, we showed that when the situation, here I have a video, I don't know if they can play it back from there. I cannot know if you're showing it. Yes, I say it now. Okay. So in this case, well, the video is playing back. If you can maybe forward it, someone forward it towards the end, not completed to the end, but towards the end. In this setup, we showed that when this outdoor space where the embodiment takes place is filled in with a crowd of people, then when the behavior of the crowd towards the participant is a negative one, in other words, instead of acknowledging you or saluting you, they try to avoid you, they turn around, they walk away, or they have expressions of disgust towards you, then we found that racial bias actually increased after going through this experience. It's okay, you can stop the video now. I'm going to skip to the next slide. So we concluded in this paper that though the above is really important, there needs to be more research in this direction, we should also be very cautious about the idea of using virtual reality to foster empathy. And that's something that also has been, the idea of virtual reality as an empathy machine has been scrutinized by many who argue that it's a perfect good excuse for, let's say, the privileged ones to claim what it feels like, what an experience of an oppressed person might be like. And it's empathy in itself cannot justify any changes in behavior. So towards this direction, we came up with this new idea based on the golden rule principle to see how it can be used to foster prosocial attitudes and behavior. And the golden rule principle, in its positive form, it states that you should do to others what you would want others to do to you. And in negative form, it states that you should not, or you do not do to others what you would not others to do to you. And both the positive and negative forms are equivalent. So based on the negative form of the golden rule principle, we introduced the golden rule embodiment paradigm. And I'm going to introduce two studies based on this concept in order to better understand what it is about. But the main idea is that here, participants or the user is embodied in a situation that causes harm to another person. And this person can be, will be a virtual one, because of course you do not want to cause harm to anyone. And then you can relive the same experience, but this time, instead of being embodied as one of the aggressor, you are embodied as the victim. So from this new perspective of being the victim, you have a first-hand experience of that aggressive behavior, and most importantly, you can witness your own previous engagement in this behavior or complicity if you do not necessarily act badly and so on. So a first study that relates to this, you can play again this video here if you would like for me. There's also some audio, though it is in Spanish, and I'm not sure everybody will understand it all, but you can at least hear the tone of voice, which is important. In this example, led by Neiret, participants were put inside the body of a female victim of sexual harassment.
Dice que la molestamos.
As you can hear in this setup, participants are a part of a group of men who are verbally harassing a lone woman who's sitting there having her coffee.
No hay nada que entender, todas son iguales. Ya verás cómo al final viene. Deja, ahora voy y te la traigo.
Vale, levanta las manos, ok.
So
Levanta
later
la mano
on,
derecha y
participants
hacia tu izquierda.
are embodied
Vale, ves que hay un
again,
espejo ahí.
and there are different experimental conditions. And one condition, participants can still be part of the group of men harassing the woman, or they can be put inside the body of a woman receiving the aggressive behavior by the group of men, or they can simply witness the whole scene from a third-person perspective, not interacting with any of these two groups.
Mira hacia abajo, hacia tu cuerpo. Eso, ok. Ahora mira hacia tu izquierda. Ok, levanta la mano. Saluda hacia el espejo. Ok, muy bien. Baja la mano.
¿Un besito? No te cuesta nada. Un beso así.
Dejadme en paz, qué pesados. En serio. No
Here's
tenéis
the
nada más que
example
hacer.
of what
Qué fuerte, macho.
the victim experienced. So participants re-experience that, and they see themselves from the woman's perspective now, either taking part in the verbal harassment along with the other virtual men, or not acting at all, not doing anything.
¿Qué te crees que no te he visto? No para de morder.
I don't know if you can forward the video a bit later on, or if not, you can stop it or mute it. Later, about a week or so later, a few days after having this experience, participants returned to the lab to have a different experience, and they did the Milgram obedience study. And this study, I'm sure that many people, if not everyone, are familiar with. Basically, you sit in front of another person, a virtual character, and you're asking questions. Every time the person answers wrong, you have to electroshock them. And you go on until the end of the experiment. And the virtual character, a woman, is constantly complaining that she cannot take it anymore, and she's asking to be let out. And what was found was that participants who had the experience of being in the woman's body in the previous setup tended to drop out of that much earlier and delivering the least number of electroshocks to the virtual female compared to the other two control conditions, with the main control of third person's perspective being somewhere on the average. And for those who were part of the group of men, without witnessing the scene from outside, from the female's victim's body, delivering the greatest amount of electroshocks. The second example refers to police aggression against black suspects. And here, participants took part, participants were police officers. It was done with police officers in a city department, police department in New York. If you can also start this video, please. You can you can see what it was about. So they have to interrogate a suspect, and along with another virtual character, who's starting to harass the victim.
Deja, ahora voy y te la traigo.
It's the next video, so it's not this one. It's the next slide, this one.
Good morning, officers. I have an update about the jewelry store burglary this morning. We managed to pick up 2 subjects, and we have some leads. We caught this guy 1 block west of the... So what do you say? I'll go handle the first subject, and both of you go interview the second one?
Thank you, Johnson. We'll take it from here. So, you want to get started?
Sure. Tell me your name.
Look, man, let me go. I haven't done anything.
Listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And trust me, you do not want to test my patience. So either you start talking right now, or we're going to be in here for a long time. Oh, no, look at that. The equipment isn't working. Oh, no. I'm talking about rights. Remember that paper you signed? That gives me and my friend here the right to do whatever the f we want. So you listen carefully now, My friend here is going to ask you questions. Answer it. That's 3 strikes right there, So you stop whining about a law, you understand? I'm giving you one last chance to start talking.
Oh, you gotta believe me, man. I had nothing to do with this. I was just trying to catch the bus. Let me go, please.
Man, this guy. You know what? I don't have time for this. Thank you, Johnson. We'll take it from here. So, you want to get started?
Participants have a whole new experience, but from the perspective
Look, man,
of
let
the
me go.
victim,
I haven't done anything.
themselves reacting or not to the other virtual police officer who's verbally assaulting them.
So, you want to get started?
I was just trying to catch the bus. Let me go, please.
Man, this guy. You know what? I don't have time for this. Hi, how you doing?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you?
Great.
So finally,
been so busy, man.
This
From a
happened.
day off last week?
That's a different experience. I'm sorry, I'm speaking over the video and I'm not, well, I think that somebody has stopped it. Anyway, I'll just explain the follow-up. The ending of the video was a different session where participants were asked again to come back for another virtual reality experience, and they found themselves in this virtual coffee shop waiting the turn to have coffee. And then they witnessed the same police officer from the interrogation the other day walking in, asking how they're doing. And then at some point, he starts accusing another black man who's standing there of wanting to steal the purse of another female waiting for her own coffee. And so they were interested in understanding how much participants were tended to intervene and stop this behavior, what was happening, based on the different conditions they were assigned before. And it was found that for those participants who had the first experience from the perspective of the black victim, they were more likely to stop the whole verbal assault towards the new black man. So from what we know, what has been shown before is that for a minority of people, if you experience a traumatic event, this might actually lead to more aggressive behavior, in some cases to PTSD. But there is this other group that they can convert the suffering to prosocial behavior, and hence the quote altruism born of suffering. And participants embodied as the victim in the new concept of the GREP experience, the Golden Rule Embodiment principle paradigm, experience some psychological distress. It's certainly not traumatic, and you for sure know that what is happening is not real, it's virtual reality. But this experience of the victim does arouse negative affect in participants. So in future encounters of a same type of situation or a similar situation, this can lead participants and the user to recall that negative affect, and consequently also lead them towards avoiding the behavior that was associated with these negative feelings. So the difference between using VR as an empathy machine and this principle I spoke about here today is that in the first one, the participant is always a passive receiver of harm from other people, whereas in this concept, you are actively involved in the harm towards others, another person, or you are just complicit in that behavior, and then you experience this harm from the embodied victim's viewpoint, which is another way of maybe explaining how changes in behavior leading to more prosocial behavior can arise. I'm not sure I went over time. I hope I didn't. I just wanted to thank you all for listening to me and my colleagues at the event lab who have contributed to the work I presented here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Domna. I hope you can hear me by now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Domna. Very refreshing, especially seeing that empathy can actually be used and be motivated in virtual reality, but you can actually achieve the opposite effect. I think that's a very wise lesson for everyone in the audience if you are developing or using virtual reality. So once more, thank you very much. So this was Domna sharing a lot of research.
Yeah, and I guess, unfortunately, we will not have time for questions right now. But if you were interested in any of the parts of the paper, I guess we can contact Domna afterwards.
Yes.
If that's all right. But in general, if you take a look at your cell phones and the Mentimeter, there is still an option to ask questions. So from now on, if you'd be interested in anything, it's good to note it down immediately, not to take it in your head. And then we will either have time for addressing the questions, or we can leave it with the speakers to get back to them afterwards, or you can contact them directly. We're people in the end, aren't we?
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luboš, for the practicalities.
Good.
So our next speaker is Aaron Exu, and I love to introduce him as my bigger VR brother at Deloitte. He has been in the field for way longer than anyone that I know. Before Deloitte, he worked for Embodiment Group, which used virtual reality for empathy and embodiment already. So one of the experiences that Domna was explaining about solitary was actually developed by Aaron and his team. So there is a connection between all the speakers we have. And Aaron will share a little bit more about this in how we apply virtual reality and embodiment in business for what we call enduring human capabilities. Not wanting to steal too much of your thunder, Aaron, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Can everybody hear me clearly and see me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, perfect. And everybody can see the presentation as well. Thank you, Thomas, for the kind introductions, and that was a wonderful speech by Domna. Thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and all the research. As Thomas mentioned, I'll give a little bit of background around how I got started in this industry, and then I'll talk a little bit about what Deloitte is actually building as part of Enduring Human Capabilities and our larger learning and development series of experiences in collaboration with one of the, in my opinion, strongest startups in this field, focused on soft skills training, empathy building, and a bunch of other different sorts of soft skills. So I'll kick off by introducing our Deloitte Unlimited Reality practice and then a bit about myself as well. Thomas mentioned one of the experiences actually was developed on the slides previously called After Solitary, which was about the intense burden of solitary confinement in the United States. That was developed by the startup I was previously with, Embodiment Group. And it was a 3D spatial experience, real time, that allowed you to walk around in a photogrammetrically captured environment that we actually went out and captured of a solitary confinement cell. And we also interviewed the inmate extensively using a technique called videogrammetry, where we capture that person in 3D. You can actually stand by that individual, sit by them, and listen to their story all in a spatial manner, thereby connecting you to his story in a much more visceral and spatial way, really helping you understand how horrible solitary confinement actually is and how it's not very helpful as a method of having somebody be trained in that way. And actually, interestingly, one of the other projects that Domna was showing was also a project that we developed out of exile that we took to Sundance Film Festival back in 2016 or 17, if I'm not mistaken, which was a story about a young LGBT gentleman named Daniel, who actually was kicked out of his home for being part of the LGBTQ society, community. And he was actually, beaten by his family. We were able to recreate that environment using motion capture actors, because he had video footage using his phone of that horrible moment. And so we were able to showcase what youth homelessness looks like and what most LGBTQ society members need to go through, sadly, in the United States when they come out to their parents. So, in the past, let's say 10 years, I was part of a couple dozen of those types of immersive journalism experiences, we called them, which were inspired by Mel's work out of Barcelona and the work that we were doing at Embodiment Group with Nani de la Peña. So, after doing a couple dozen experiences like that one, focused on places like, Syria or concepts like domestic violence, then I moved to Deloitte, and now I help lead different divisions of Deloitte's unlimited reality practice, which is a little bit more enterprise focused. But we do have a particular division within our practice of 110 plus people focused on augmented work and learn. Within augmented work and learn, we have a specific section called immersive learning, which I'm co-leading with some of our partners and principals, dedicated towards hard skills training, everything that you would be training on using your hands out in the field, scenarios that might be difficult to train with in a physical setting, but also for soft skills, cognitive decision-making type training modules that we're developing for clients, as well as ourselves internally for Deloitte to use. We embarked on an exciting journey with our learning and development community, and then Tailspin as an organization, which I'll introduce soon as well, where we started developing an enduring human capabilities experience that was really focused on human capabilities, and would like to take some time to define enduring human capabilities. The way Deloitte sees learning currently and in the future is bifurcating into two ways. One, you're seeing a lot of different types of skills that people are actively being trained on using current methodologies, things like coding, financial planning, product management, program management, all concepts that I'm sure we're all familiar with. These skills are much easier to teach using traditional methodologies, such as a 2D environment, pen and paper, conversation. But when you start moving into enduring human capabilities, that requires a lot more of an immersive and experiential, and like I said in the beginning, a much more visceral connection to the content. It's very difficult to teach someone resilience or emotional intelligence or empathy or curiosity, informed agility. So these concepts really require you to nurture these capabilities rather than be able to teach them by just looking at a sheet of paper, and they require an experiential medium that we believe virtual reality and unlimited reality overall is perfect for. So what we did was we embarked on a journey with Tailspin, and I mentioned Tailspin earlier. Tailspin is one of my favorite companies focused on human skills and soft skills and capabilities training and learning, because what they've done is originally when we were developing a lot of content back with Emblematic or for Deloitte as well previously, experiences would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build. You would have to have motion capture, you would have to have videogrammetry, photogrammetry, all concepts I won't get into too deeply because we don't have enough time. But it was very expensive to build out the beautiful experiences that we were building, that some of which you saw in the previous presentation. So what Tailspin has done is they were able to build out a platform, a low-code, no-code platform that allows for people to come in as learning and development or scientists or psychologists, psychiatrists, whoever would like to develop content for virtual reality without actually having the skills to code, to go into the platform in a no-code, no-code environment, and then start coding using a visual scripting tool and selecting from a pre-existing set of environments, characters, animations, faces, reactions, as well as be able to write out a script. And so it brings down the costs of being able to create virtual reality content for things like enduring human capabilities or empathy from hundreds of thousands of dollars to less than tens of thousands of dollars, and bring out the overall project and product development timeline from months, if not years, to weeks and days. So I'm very excited about that, and I'd like to share with you a small video that introduces the platform, just because I think it'd be very valuable for everybody in the audience. And if you'd like to find out more about the tool itself or talk about how you guys can start creating these types of experiences for your own projects without having to learn how to code in Unity or Unreal, then please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with that team. So with that, I'll share the video.
Copilot Designer, Tailspin's no-code authoring tool for immersive learning content, empowering creators to do what they do best, create. Copilot Designer enables users to author emotionally realistic immersive learning experiences in which learners engage in roleplay with virtual human characters. These experiences track soft skills development in real time and provide learners with performance scoring and feedback. Using a node-based authoring system, Copilot Designer gives users the flexibility to create content as complex as a multi-lesson learning module teaching a specific set of skills, or as simple as a single dialogue exchange or piece of micro-learning content. This no-code authoring tool gives creators the power, revolutionizing how immersive learning content is developed. Organizations and creators easily develop the effective immersive learning content that their learners need. Contact the Tailspin team to learn more about Copilot Designer and how you can design the next generation of immersive learning content.
Perfect. Now I'll switch back into the presentation. So, as I mentioned, we collaborated with Tailspin, and we chose a difficult subject matter that Deloitte likes to.
Tailspin's ever-growing content library includes immersive learning experience.
There we go. And we chose a subject matter that was very difficult for us to continue teaching using the current methodologies, as I mentioned. We chose emotional intelligence, the ability to have difficult conversations in a work environment when your colleague and your partner is struggling immensely with different types of situations that they might not have faced before. And so in this past year, we collaborated with Tailspin in building out this experience, which is now ready. We went through the Certified to Use program inside of Deloitte, which allows us to test this for all Deloitte employees. We bought about 50 headsets so we can start testing this with different types of individuals inside and outside of Deloitte. And now we're very excited to be able to start teaching enduring human capabilities using an immersive tool such as virtual reality. Connecting the previous world that I was a part of, where we were teaching things like empathy through immersive journalism, to the new world where I'm a part of within the enterprise community that has, I would say, not taught as effectively as they could using immersive tools like this one. The next step for us as a team is to work with volunteers from around the world. So if there are any Deloitte practitioners inside of the audience today, please reach out to me. We have 50 VR headsets that we'd be happy to send over to you, and then test out the efficacy of the program in teaching using virtual reality versus traditional methodologies, and see if we are actually teaching the content in a much better way, and we're actually able to continue nurturing what the content is teaching using virtual reality as a tool. So with that, I'll pass it back to the hosts. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and I look forward to answering a couple of questions if you have any.
Pleasure to see that for the audience, Aaron is calling him from Los Angeles, but he actually was here in Prague 2 years ago before I joined Deloitte in Prague. And we were talking about exactly this opportunity, how we can bring human enduring capabilities to life using virtual reality, even with some people that are today in the audience with us. We had a workshop, and it's beautiful to see, Aaron, how much it matured by now, how easy the technology has become to actually build your own experiences on what is most impactful for your company. So I've seen that we've come a very, very long way. And Aaron, thank you so much for waking up so early to be with us today, sharing your perspectives. And I hear that, Lubos, looking at you, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, but I think we will need to leave that and send to Aaron if he can somehow deal with that. There is a question on, please talk about the language recognition in the experience and all that stuff. I mean, that would be really interesting. So, yeah, we will need to get back to that, hopefully in video rather than writing. But otherwise, we need to move on. There's so much interesting stuff with the speakers. Yeah, let's move to the next one.
Okay, Aaron, thank you very much. And for the next speaker, we have Parul Wadhwa, who also is calling from, if I'm not mistaken, also Los Angeles, or in any case, San Francisco. It's very close. And Parul is a creative director at Emerging Media. She recently created her own experience stories in VR. And it's about empathy, it's about embodiment. I don't want to steal any kind of introduction that Parul wants to say. So I will just leave the room for you, Parul. and the audience is all yours. And just one more comment, it's very good to see you again after 2 years, because Parul was also with us at the very first TransTech event here in Prague. So welcome back, Parul.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you so much for inviting me, you all, and to Hanka as well. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm joining in from San Francisco, and I'm a creative director, and we'll be sharing, one of my pieces today called Stories of Home. And I'm thankful to Dolma and Erin for actually laying the groundwork on the research behind my piece, which is a lot similar as well. So treat this as a case study. Let me just share my screen and talk more about what I'm going to be doing today. I hope you're all able to view my screen. Awesome, thank you. I just wanted to speak today. The topic itself is very intriguing and very central to my work as well. The research methodologies that, the topic sort of intrigues is something that I've brought into my work as well, called Stories of Home. So just to give you a little bit of a background, this piece is an immersive media piece, which is available on the Oculus Store. It's readily available to download, where we've used embodiment as a possibility in virtual reality to visually substitute a person's real body by life-sized virtual one. And in this particular piece that we've developed called Stories of Home, we've used participatory methods of storytelling. We've collaborated with immigrants and refugees working here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and have come together to tell their own stories co-collaboratively with me as a director. So the purpose for doing that sort of a piece was multifold. There was so much going on here in the United States in the last couple of years, with the political shift as well. And there was this unbalanced sort of hatred towards the others, so to speak, or the refugees or the immigrants who were coming to the United States, with all sort of rules, in the political realm as well. We wanted to address that as to what we can do as creators who are using such a powerful medium. And we wanted to create a piece which could address things like co-presence. What would it feel like to be in an immersive environment, or in an environment where refugees are transiting from one border to another? Or what would it feel like for you to feel experiential immediacy, or to even transcend that sort of idea as to whether you're a refugee or not, to just feel what it means to be, or sort of cut through the idea of dehumanizing, refugees and immigrants. Oftentimes what happens is when you're looking through journalistic pieces, and my colleagues before me in this presentation have shared a bunch of interesting examples, what happens is that journalists kind of go into a community, create a story, and come out of it and present it as their point of view. So we wanted to alter that using the medium of virtual reality to just say that this piece is being made to recreate what has happened to these immigrants and refugees. We are also working with the intention to cut that dehumanizing factor and to address them as humans first. Just to again give you a little bit of idea as to who I am an immersive storyteller working here in the San Francisco Bay Area using newer technologies specifically for impact-based storytelling, and a little bit for the enterprise work as well. I currently work as the Adobe Creative Ambassador and also at Epic Games as a virtual production fellow, and I've been developing VR for the last couple of years. That's how I've been in touch with Thomas and Hanka, and thank you again for inviting me and sharing my work, because I've been creating all of these interesting pieces within Facebook or Meta's Oculus Start and Creator programs. So I'll leave it over here, but I'd love to get in touch with you. I will leave my website towards the end as well. Coming back to Stories of Home, kind of taking that very participatory approach, I just want to talk you through the process that we took. It was crafted through a very collaborative approach where we worked I worked with a nonprofit called Story Center here at Berkeley, and we worked with a group of 3 refugee and immigrant women who shared their personal narratives about home. And the way we kind of approached that story was to ask them to dig into their memories and bring something which was materially important to them, some sort of a material memory, any object that they carried with them once they transcended the border from their home country into the United States. And the whole idea was to give the users or the audience to walk into their lives as women. The couple of reasons again here was that when you're looking at narratives of migration, you do not usually hear about women, or they're kind of at the back end of helping the families migrate, and those personal stories are kind of lost. The other thing that we wanted to bring into the fold was most of these women or immigrants and refugees, when they come to the United States, are often battling with that newer identity. So there is a misrepresentation that happens on the part of journalists or storytellers who are representing them. So in order to cut that, we also partnered with another nonprofit organization called Wellness in Action, who brought in their psychotherapists to us. And we trained these women to kind of approach those stories in a very objective way, but at the same time, keep it very, very personal. The idea to do so was to create a virtual reality experience, kind of thinking about how these women transcended, but also talking about very day-to-day lives of theirs, talking about a very specific memory, and asking the audience to embody that experience as that person, as that woman who has transcended that border. So we created 3 tilt brush stories. We also used, a bunch of other techniques, and the whole project was created in unity, in co-collaboration with these women. So the photograph that you can see on the left side of my screen was a real picture of a refugee and a woman from Nepal who immigrated, and this was her picture at her refugee camp that we then co-created or recreated using tilt brush as a tool in virtual reality. And so the mishmash happened with using real photographs and real objects and creating 3D models of them and asking the audience to step into that story where they can experience the world of that refugee woman. So the experience itself, which is available on Oculus Quest, has essentially 3 stories, one from Nepal, a woman, Nepali refugee woman whose picture you can see here. The other story is also very interesting from a Tibetan woman, and I believe is one of the few stories of Tibetan refugees told in virtual reality, as I've been told, speaking about the prayer book or the scroll that Tibetan refugees carry with them when they migrate to the United States. And then there is a third story as well. It's a completely participatory approach, and we do not expect the audience to approach one story after the other. The decision-making ability is completely left on the audience as well, and the stories are told about material objects that they carried with them and they valued the most when they were at a very difficult time of transition in migration. And also we explored the idea of self-representation. So it was very much to see how these women wanted to address themselves or represent themselves, of course, in partnership with our licensed therapists from Wellness in Action, instead of how I or, the organization I was working with wanted to represent itself. The picture that you can see on the left side is from one of the stories where an Afghan refugee woman, transitioned into this new world in the United States. And she kind of talks about her activism very much so, especially what was happening in Afghanistan pretty recently. And we brought in that narrative. We documented everything in video and photographs before we actually translated that whole experience using tilt brush into virtual reality. So sort of an animated view of, what Nahid, the protagonist, the Afghan protagonist, looks like and was saying for you to experience in virtual reality. So what I'm going to do here, and I've shared the entire experience with Deloitte Studios, here for you all to experience that post this presentation, to kind of see if that works, all the bigger ideas that my colleagues were presenting today from amazing research that they've done at their various institutions. And considering this very much as a piece or a case study as to how those ideas come together, I'm going to play a 2D trailer simply just to give you an idea as to what the project is. And post that, I really encourage you to check out the piece and share some feedback if you might have. Can I request the studio to please play the trailer for me?
Sit all alone in a heap as I wait by the door. Cry in my sleep, in my dreams as I wait for more. So where are you? Where are you? Why did you go? So where are you? Where are you? Why did you go? Try, but I fall every time you walk through that door. Why didn't I realize, but I should have known, da, 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 da.
Just the last couple of things that I want to say. I think at that point, the last couple of years have been, point of turmoil for most of us here in the United States, especially people who are coming from outside and trying to transition into this new fragmented reality. And we just wanted to hold space as creators using this very powerful medium and to voice, the stories of those who are marginalized by the society. And it felt like just at that point seemed like a very great tool to embody the experience of these immigrant and refugee women. But at the same time, we didn't want to talk about experiences that were traumatic or to sort of give an idea to people as to what their journey was like. We wanted to bring in a fragment of their personal story and to give them or to hold space for them to represent themselves. At that note, I'm going to be leaving my website here for you to check out more of my work, and also about Stories of Home, which has been touring film festivals for almost a year now, and we just recently won the Best Virtual Reality Experience at the Harlem International Film Festival in New York City. So definitely check that out. I'm sure that you all have an opportunity to see it, hopefully, towards the end of this session today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll take any questions that you might have towards the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this really shows, as Parul having as our third speaker, we have a lot of research around embodiment and VR, and we have a lot of different areas in life where we can actually apply it. This was one of our reasons we selected three very various speakers. Lubos, again, looking at you, do we have time for questions? Parul, if we have any questions through the Mentimeter, I will get in touch with you. to make sure that we have an opportunity to answer them. And as Parul mentioned, we have the experience of her stories of home in VR in the headsets over there. So after our final talk, which I'm going to announce in a second, we will have time for demoing and for networking. But last and certainly not least, Sarah, which is our final and only speaker in person, which barely needs an introduction here in Czech Republic. She is our archaeologist who is doing research in AI, cloud societies, and whatnot. Sarah, I will leave the word to you because I cannot possibly put in words what you are going to say next.
Me neither.
I can say one thing. We have explored virtual reality, embodiment, kindness, and empathy. Sarah is going to take over and putting all of that in perspective for a society.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I've got, right, I promised them 15 minutes max, and I've got about 30 slides, so it'll be a bit of a blitzkrieg. But essentially, coming from an archaeological, anthropological background, one of the things that really fascinates me is, for example, a concept of reciprocity, giving back, the role of the individual in society. So I really want to use the concept of reciprocity to be able to understand how kindness can be helped and kind of elevated with the help of technologies. So firstly, we'll talk a little bit about altruism. Secondly, we'll talk a little bit about civilizational structures. Then we'll talk about Christmas, always nice, always good to be prepared early. And then finally, we'll talk about blockchain, and we'll also talk about a research group that has been announced last week. They finally kind of confirmed it for me, where we'll be using virtual reality very extensively to basically model Plato's polis and kind of explore the relationship between the individual and civilization and how conflict emerges, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll get to that at the end. In case you guys are sleepy, the key kind of takeaway points is that reciprocity, which for me is one of the kind of embodiments of humanity, is ancient. It's about a 3 million years kind of old phenomenon that we have been really kind of building on as humanity. And basically the nation states that we live in, the companies that we live in, the relationships that we maintain are very much reciprocity based. Things like blockchain and VR as well. I don't really want to fetishize one technology over another. It's all part of a massive mosaic, and it's all also manifestation of natural human evolution. And finally, also that nation states are dying. This is not me making some kind of anarchist claim. It's more, we have to realize that the world that we live in is changing rapidly and that the structures that we were used to and relying on are no longer necessarily like as sturdy as we thought that they were. So it's important to be able to embody this kindness and embody humanity through technology if we want to scale and also adapt our society effectively. So these seem as unrelated images, but essentially what I really want to show you is that reciprocity manifests itself in various ways, the relationships between people, whether that is game theory and playing games to kind of suss out what the other person feels and to be able to, in a pretty safe environment, understand like the relationships and the personalities of people, whether it is the trading of shelves in the Blombos cave and the Grotte du Pigeon 150 years ago, where there was a kind of concept of symbolic behavior, and through that kind of trading you were building social capital and things like that. Or whether it is Napoleon III having Carcassonne reconstructed at the same time as Notre Dame and at the same time as building the Statue of Liberty in order to give the French people a sense of belonging. Technology and reciprocity and the sense of belonging are very much kind of woven into every single civilization that we see out there. The kind of 5 key takeaway points that I really want you to, or like the terminology, which we'll go a little bit into in the presentation, are these 5 things, which for me are really key to understanding that dynamics of humanity, the dynamics of society, and they are something that we also saw in the previous 3 presentations, can be really nicely replicated and simulated in a safe environment in virtual reality. So that is social capital. If any of you are interested, Pierre Bourdieu wrote a really superb book on this in 1971. It's basically like, it's not all about the cash, it's about also accumulating some kind of like a kindness factor, some kind of kudos that you're constantly kind of, you have an algorithm in your head that if someone gives you something and you don't necessarily give them money in return, but you do something nice for them, that's some kind of building of social capital. reciprocity, social contract, which is a very odd thing where a lot of kind of sociologists believe, and I don't agree with it necessarily from my research, that we constantly have like a social contract, a social obligation to the society that we live in. That is pretty much due to the fact that the societies that we live in are huge, and our brains cannot necessarily cope with that. Our brains are designed to cope with roughly 250 relations. So if you've got a nation state of 50 million people, it's very difficult to keep order, so you have to invent pretty fake things like this in order to make it work. Virtual reality takes that burden away, and you can test and simulate yourself in very complex societies without necessarily having the same structural burden as you do have in real life. Game theory and swarm intelligence, and finally the exchange and the gift. So if you give something to someone, whether you're actually doing it for free or not. So, thinking that you're an altruist. The kind of key takeaway messages is that we always expect something back. We calculate value in our heads all the time, and individualism and community go hand in hand. And this is something that I really want to stress, because there is basically quite a lot of as Marcel Mauss, a famous anthropologist, also talks about, there's a lot of schizophrenia between the role of the individual and society in society. So we kind of believe that they don't really tessellate, go together. If you focus on the individual, then kind of everyone thinks that you're selfish. If you focus on the collective, then everyone thinks you're a communist. And there's a really big, even like political discourse that kind of divides these two concepts. And I believe that they're actually really closely linked, and also something that we want to study in my research group, the genesis of conflict, how people behave, how the individual and society intertwine. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But what is true that our history has been basically evolving around the concept of human bonds and individual bonds. So you can very well see that in the evolution of money and the economy. From the Robinson Crusoe economy, which is basically I give you a stick and you give me a shell, all the way to cryptocurrency, what we see manifesting all the time is some kind of quantification of belonging and some kind of quantification of relationships. And it's all a pretty like simple evolutionary algorithm. You're basically constantly calculating the benefits in your head, the indirect versus direct reciprocity. So will it benefit me, or if I do something nice now, might it benefit my children? And it's a constant kind of feedback loop that is happening where things like trust and solidarity are being built. Now, those are kind of very human things. And it really kind of peeves me that people see technology as something that kind of stops this from happening, that it's something clinical, that it's something bad, it's something that makes humanity go away. And quite the opposite. Anthropologists have been kind of studying this in a very qualitative manner for the last 100 years, but virtual reality can actually help us quantify that research, scale that research, and make it much more interesting. Again, wanted to show you that what is the role of a corporate, like we're in Deloitte, like what is our role towards society? The kindness aspect of it is massive, and it's massively important. In Victorian England, you had the concept of noblesse oblige, where if you were an aristocrat, you didn't necessarily have to pay taxes, but it was expected of you to like build a museum or build a gallery or build an orphanage. Similarly, our roles as individuals, but also our roles as corporates, is now to be able to give something back to society, and we're only going to be able to give back with the help of tech. No longer are we in a scalable, like physical world where we can give back individually or kind of like pour soups into bowls. Of course, that's fantastic, but tech is the only way in which we can scale this social reciprocity onwards. Unfortunately, and I hope that you don't mind memes, I enjoy memes. The problem is that there's a lot of greenwashing. There's a lot of, like, we're in June, which is Pride Month, and you see some of the companies change the logo to be rainbow unless they are working in Saudi Arabia, in which case they just leave it as it is. So there's a lot of massive hypocrisy happening as well, and we need to connect to the individual outside, because there's been an erosion of trust between people and the institution, whatever the institution is, and we can see the way that it's going in our political realm. So the transparency that we can get through technology, the scalability that we can get through technology, is the thing that kind of makes this corporate X-washing, like whether that's LGBT or ecology, which are all incredibly important concepts, but to stop fetishizing them and actually to start reacting and talking to the population, putting them in simulated environments and making sure that it goes beyond marketing and it actually has a kind effect on society. Which is, by the way, something that one of my favorite comedians, and Papa Elon, of course, have been talking about, this kind of concept of virtue signaling. And again, technology, I think, cuts through that like a knife through butter. Let me see how I'm doing for time. Yep, I'll need to finish soon. Civilization is incredibly difficult to kind of determine, and we're very much like neck deep in trying to get it right with our research group. But essentially, civilization is just a herd, just with material culture and symbolism and abstraction. And it's very difficult to kind of scale that. Again, talking about the Dunbar number, if you want to kind of inflict culture or change amongst like a large group of people, the only way that you can do that is either build an incredibly rigid, massive structure like a federation, or you can do it through technology, where like the person can put on a VR headset at home and have that experience without having like all the symbolic kind of specificities that things that kind of big societies have, whether that's a national anthem, whether that's a flag, and whether those are the kind of symbolic tips of the iceberg that try to keep a society together. Technology, again, kind of can put that to one side and basically just like focus on the core of human relationships. The Roman Empire was fantastic at doing this. Again, the memes, I hope that you don't mind. Panem et circenses, bread and circuses, that the relationships of these institutions with the individual were very much often exploitatory, but also often just like a social evolutionary hack. I'll give you something to eat, I'll give you something to enjoy, and then you'll be happy. And I think that virtual reality, for example, or blockchain, as I'll talk about later, they're enablers of the individual. They actually emancipate the individual to have some role in society without kind of like having this top-down approach of inflicting symbolism and civilization and basically just expecting everyone else to listen. This is also, I think, quite a problematic thing, because basically what the social contract, what that means is that basically you cannot have anything else but the government. And therefore the choice for the citizen to basically act the way that you want to act and be a part of a society that you want to be in, you don't necessarily get a say in that, because it's a feedback loop of you contributing to the nation and then getting back, I had to laugh about this, high quality universal public services. When we look at healthcare, for example, we are now getting into a stage with virtual reality where you can do operations at a distance, where you have things like telemedicine, where in places like Africa, because of the technological leapfrogging, because there's not so much regulation, you can transport blood and organs over like quite incredible distances, as the company Zipline has been doing. So this kind of feedback loop is getting kind of a little bit shaken up by technology, and I think that we as society are not reacting swiftly enough to that. So I think, again, technology can be a great explainer and enabler of the citizen or of the individual to function effectively in society. And I already mentioned this, that there's a huge problem in the way that anthropology has functioned, that it kind of takes highly individualistic cultures and highly collectivistic cultures. And that's actually, for me, a splitting of kindness, because what you're essentially saying is that, oh, either you're all great and like singing Kumbaya and dancing in a circle together, or you're all like incredibly individualistic, as if there's something wrong with that. And the kind of even academic approach to kind of bridging these two approaches has been pretty bad. And it's been changing rapidly thanks to the introduction of simulatory kind of environments such as we see in virtual reality. And this is incredibly grainy, and it's so grainy I didn't realize it's going to be that grainy. But one of the things where you can embody kindness through medicine, for example, is its personalization. So we had COVID. For example, I've got one lung busted ever since I was small, so I'll probably have a different reaction to COVID that someone else might have. The problem is that because we treat everything statistically and we basically treat medicine like a part of a Gaussian curve, they tell you, okay, well, the standard treatment for COVID is this, whereas we actually have the kind of methods like artificial intelligence to be able to, with machine learning, personalize medicine, which would be incredible. And that's, again, bridging the gap between the individual and society, giving you the personalized treatment that you need, whilst kind of living in some kind of like bigger group. So I will just skip to, because time is upon us. I'll actually take you very quickly through Christmas, because Christmas is a really beautiful ritual that shows kind of the trading between people, the way that the individual and society interact. The most important thing is the complex ritual of exchange and symbolism, and also gift giving that creates buy-in. So at Christmas, you give something to someone and you're very excited about that, and they give you back a paper clip. You're not going to be excited about that. As kind of immaterialistic as you might think that you are, you're constantly going through this, through these very sophisticated rituals. These rituals actually come from all the way ancient Rome, Saturnalia, which was, I think, in 376, where Christmas originated from. And it was a period, one day a year, where the slaves would be treated as owners and the owners would be treated as slaves. And it created this kind of beautiful social vent where all the frustration and all the like pretty horrible life that you had, you could enjoy for one day. It's a day of feasting. And the really interesting thing is that you can see in the history of society that to kind of like get out of your mold, get out of your box and try to establish yourself as an individual has been massive. But they didn't have the technology that we have now to be able to cater for that every day of the year because the society would be in chaos. But we now have that. We now have that social event in the kind of form of virtual reality or anything else. And we can study these relationships with much more nuance and we can give those individuals the emancipation that they need without all the bells and whistles that you have around rituals like Saturnalia. If I can recommend one book, it would be Unwrapping Christmas by Daniel Miller. It's absolutely fantastic. And what it shows as well, there's a really interesting statistical analysis that's been done where, again, hugely grainy, oh my God, what happened to my presentation? But when, this was from 2021, yes. And the plan to gift money and to plan to receive money, or the preference to receive money for Christmas was massive. Bear that statistic in mind. In 2018, however, which was of course before COVID, there was a really strong disagreement with giving or receiving money for Christmas because it was seen as very transactional and actually quite rude. The thing is, when COVID came, people were strapped for cash, people were in pretty dire kind of like social situations, and they were actually like, you know what, that vase that I'll return anyway, nah, keep it, give me like $200 instead. And it's a really interesting change that we're going through, and one of the symptoms that shows that we really do need technology to be able to bridge that gap between the individual feeling lost in society, not having that anchor, society being in pretty much chaos after a global pandemic, and we can really get those individuals back and we can give them that anchor that they need through the help of tech. So blockchain, in my in my opinion, I was speaking at a conference at Ethereum Prague recently, and it's a massive, massive buzzword. And I'm someone who enjoys debullshitting technology for the general public. But it's actually when we mature the tech and when we stop seeing virtual reality, AI, and blockchain, and we put it all together, that's the beautiful new mosaic that basically gives the underpinning for cloud civilizations that I'm currently researching. We already actually spoke about social capital, so I can skip that. There's more memes. Sorry, but we'll skip the memes. I can send you the presentation afterwards. I don't want to annoy you with that. But I think that blockchain and in kind of marrying with other technologies can solve really massive problems that we're up against. POAPs are a really neat thing. It's basically, you know, the scouting movement, right? And in the scouting movement, if you, for example, can build a fire, you get a little badge. POAPs are basically a decentralized way of, it's a proof of attendance protocol, and it's a really nice way of kind of rewarding people when they've been somewhere so they can actually have lifelong learning. So, for example, you right now would get a POAP badge for being here and enjoying it and having some champagne and having some bread, and that would be great. And you could collect those, and you could actually, your education doesn't stop at the age of 18 or 21. You can actually use these tokens to be able to barter on the blockchain kind of underpinning and have a decentralized parallel education, which again emancipates the individual in a huge way. For example, teach artificial intelligence to seniors, and there's this amazing woman, she's like 85 years old, and she's like, well, but what am I going to do with this? It's like, it doesn't matter, like the information is there, you can learn, and it's actually a really nice way of doing this as well. GameFi, which is decentralized gaming, is a really nice way of understanding how people behave because everyone loves games. Games have been around like as long as humanity has been around. Chimpanzees play games. And again, it's a really nice, safe environment where you can map the relationships between people and you can understand how gaming and basically like this really raw evolutionary kind of manifestation can be transformed and mapped with the help of tech, which you can get really nice analyses from. And this kind of ends with the research group that I put together. It's called Chaos, ironically enough. And we're basically simulating Plato's polis in virtual reality, where we want to understand the genesis of conflict. We want to understand, and you can read more on this. We don't have a proper website yet because it's literally a week old, but there's some information on the project here. And we're simulating how society evolves. And they're basically emergent patterns of if the kind of philosopher ruling class suddenly decide to increase taxes, do you go and stab them, or do you go and move into a different town, or do you work harder? And these are all things that we kind of consider very straightforward, but it's because archaeology and anthropology and that academia has been very collectivistic in the way that it's looked into society. And unless you're Julius Caesar, history doesn't bother to study you. And we really want to emancipate the individual, show how the individual evolves within society, and in a very safe environment, simulate how civilizations are created, how they evolve, and whether there's some optimal patterns that we're seeing. So I'll definitely keep you updated. It's going to be a kind of collaboration between the Czech Technical University and Oxford, which is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. And that's it. If you want to follow me for memes, or if you want more information on random historical obscurities, then that's my Instagram. And I just want to remind you that our role is really not to lose ourselves in the world that we're in, and to be able to scalably improve society. And the only way that we're going to do that is through tech. It's not a clinical thing. It's not a dehumanizing thing. Quite the opposite. It gives the individual a voice in history that they've never really had, and that we struggle to recreate, so we can, at least for future generations, use the technology to create a pretty more straightforward and transparent history and evolution of society. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
Sarah, next time I'm going to ask the studio to give you a mic you can actually drop, because that's the only thing that was missing from this presentation. So with this all being said, we have a whole room where we have a lot of cool headsets, a lot of experiences that every one of you can try. We also have some refreshments, some bites. The bathrooms, alcohol, very important. Before or after VR, maybe we can set up a pre and post study. That'd be interesting, Sarah. Bathrooms are over there to the right. There's the practical information. And before we dive into the demos, we are actually going to do a post research.
Research, that sounds kind of funny after this presentation. But anyways, yes. Let's give the space to the fantastic GIF on the screen. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
There we go.
So I guess our heads might be a little bit of an air balloon right now. We've heard a lot. We didn't have time to kind of, ground it after each presentation. So please, hopefully you noted down some of your questions either through the Mentimeter or to some kind of paper. I noted a couple of things that will be important to take away from here. So if you're looking to try something practically, this is what we will do here. To those who watch this as a recording, there are always places where you can try it yourself, and that's the best thing to do. If you remember, there is no better way how to become more human than tech, which sounds weird, but that was one of the points. So the more you try and the more you invest the time into kind of experimentation these days, the better for yourself and for your companies. So besides that, there are a couple of generic points to take away, but we've heard that it's not black and white. So when we said embodiment for a kinder society, there is no 100% correlation that using VR and embodiment will actually increase the empathy. So please, it's like chainsaw. Yeah, you can use it for wood for winter or kill your neighbor. So please, do not take it as a universal help for everything. It's there, but it's just a color on a palette of colors, not the only one. That's what we heard in the first session. The second one, e-learning used to be a pretty difficult thing a couple of years ago. Now it became almost a commodity. Everyone can use that. So similar stuff when we saw the tailspin. It used to be fairly difficult to get the 3D kind of learning content up and running. It seems no longer such a big problem using tailspin and maybe other stuff on shelf. So again, don't hesitate and use that. Number 3, I've got here one stuff, and that's fairly straightforward. XR is a new media. So if you're thinking about not writing a song that maybe can stay in audio, but using it for internal communication, using it for further storytelling, suddenly you're not limited by 2D only. That's great, isn't it? Yeah, so taking it as a media would work. Yeah, and then I noted down something like 3 pages from Sarah. Let's go through that line by line. Or we can see Sarah afterwards and you can talk to her about everything she said. Yeah? The point is this will be recorded to those who watched it, and unfortunately now you're full of kind of enthusiasm to try something. You can't, we can. So we will use the space here and hopefully you will be able to get to either Deloitte Experience Center or some other spaces where you can experiment with all the stuff that we talked about. Seems like sci-fi, and that's the point. It's not. It's already existing. We need to be careful. It's not like a universal soldier solving all our problems, but it's on shelf and it's not that difficult to try as it used to be a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Especially if we bring everyone together here in a community. I see so many people who actually run their business or are part of a business. Bringing this to life, that's who we also invited here. And that's the demos that you can try. So Transformative Tech as a community is nothing more and nothing less than every one of you coming together and actually making it happen and putting it in this room for us all to try. So thank you very much. I realize that was a lot of time that we spent on stage. That's done now. Now it's time for networking, for some alcohol, for some VR. And thank you all very much.
Good. If you want to achieve Zen, now you can have your silent minute or so and just type whatever you learned before you start doing all the stuff that we talked about. So it's always nice to kind of calm down a little bit.